32-bit is nice, not game-changing, not the end of the world, but nice to have. What's going on, guys? I'm Yeshaya, this is FireFace Films, and today we're doing a long-awaited follow-up video about the Tascam Portacapture X8 and what it's been like to use it for the last 2 years. But before we do, make sure you drop a like, get subscribed, and click that bell to get notified when we post. All right, on with the show. So, this is the Tascam Portacapture X8. We did an initial video about it about 2 years ago, and you can check that out here. But here's the basic details. You've got a 6-track, 4 XLR, 2 3.5, 32-bit recorder. It spits out 8 tracks when you actually record, so all 6 tracks when you're doing it, and a 2-channel mix track. I don't like the 2-channel mix track, but we'll get that anyway. So this has been a pretty good recorder for the last few years, and how we've used it has pretty much been on short films, commercial projects, unscripted content, and these are YouTube videos. So first, let's go through the setup of how we used it. So first here, you've got the actual unit itself, the X8. I've got it connected here to the D2RX through these 2 XLR cables, and then on the back here, I've got my timecode that's been designated for the recorder. It pretty much doesn't leave this here. And then I've also got my XLR cable, which we use to run it to boom mic setups when we have to do that. And then I've also got here the Rode Wireless Pro 2 that we connect through this 3.5 to dual XLR, which is a pretty handy setup, and all powered by this 20,000 milliamp hour battery bank, which is pretty sick. Okay, so let's start with the good parts of this recorder, and there's many. This is a pretty good device. Okay, so first up is the audio quality, and this is both subjective and objective, as there's a bunch of science about preamps and what kind of response they give you, and ultimately for me, I have found that the preamps on the Tascam Portacapture are pretty good. I've gotten results that I like, and it all really falls down to the op and who's using it and what they're doing, because as long as you have a good sound op, you're gonna get fantastic audio. So I've passed this off to a lot of people who have used it, even they don't fully know what they're doing, and it works out pretty well. So ultimately, it never falls on the recorder. It almost always falls on the op for as far as the audio quality. And we have the 4 XLR channels, which obviously that's great. That's good, although given how our practice has evolved, I can quickly see how that might not be enough, but to start 4 XLR channels is pretty good. And then of course, you've got the 2 3.5 millimeter jacks on the top, which is great. And most part, I actually haven't used them that much. I use one of them for our timecode channel, which we'll definitely get to that in a bit. And then the touchscreen. The touchscreen is fantastic for operation. It's really slick to actually get through the interface and try out like everything that you need to do. So they're really well laid out mix and monitoring pages. Those are nice, which is also another pro. And just seamless operation. It's not really laggy to the touch, which I love, because there's nothing more frustrating than touch devices that you touch it and it doesn't really respond the way you want. Hate that. 32-bit, obviously, we all love 32-bit. 32-bit is good. And it's nice to have, and I pretty much just record in 32-bit just because the file size to me is not a problem. It's not a problem to any clients I've sent off to. And it's not really earth-shattering, because there's a big misconception about 32-bit, and I fell for this in the beginning, but the biggest thing is, oh, you don't have to set your gain properly and you won't clip. But the kind of thing about it is, in a traditional sense, you have to mix the audio. So in a scene where somebody starts screaming or getting really loud or talking really quietly, and then it's really dynamic and low, you're going to have to mix that on the day, right? So whether you have your mixer on the device, kind of mixing the gain up as they get quiet, or mixing the gain down as they get loud, that way when it's delivered, it's all consistent. Whereas if you set that 32-bit and just let it go, the audio engineer at the back end in post is gonna have to make those decisions. So 32-bit is not really like the game-changing thing. It's more of like a safety net, and that's the biggest thing. It's a nice safety net. And speaking of that safety net, it's actually saved me twice, because I had a sound op who hit the -20 on our Rode NTG mic, and then the audio came in really, really quiet, and I had to boost it in post by a lot, but it was still usable. It wasn't a hissy, noisy mess. There was a little bit of hiss, I'll give it that, and I could have probably cleaned it up some more, but for the most part, it gave me results that I was happy with. So yeah, 32-bit can save you in a pinch. And the clipping feature, I'm not gonna lie, guys, it has 4 decibels above 0 of like tolerance, and I've never hit that. Honestly, you're more likely to clip at your device. So like that's going to be either clipping at the mic or clipping at your transmitter, like the Theos here. So realistically, it's going to be pretty hard to clip something like this, and it's going to be even harder to clip something like sound devices where they have like, I think like 14 to 17 decibels tolerance above 0. So yeah, 32-bit's nice, big 32-bit rambling as it were. 32-bit is nice, not game-changing, not the end of the world, but nice to have. Another great thing that I'm so grateful for in comparison to what we used to use, the Zoom H1N, a lot of you guys started there, I know you did, is USB powering. Now, you could do USB powering through the H1N, but it was through that crappy micro USB port. We all hated that. But this powers externally through a USB-C port. So like I mentioned before, I have the 20,000 milliamp hour power bank. I power that and the Theos receiver together. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I've never done like a scientific battery test, but I've never once had this device die on me using this kind of power solution. At most with this, like we just recently upgraded to this 20,000. Before I was using a 10,000. Most of the time it would be like maybe at the end of an 8 to 12 hour shoot day, at like 50 to 30%. And then on this 20,000, we're clocking like 8 to 12 hour days and it comes out at like 60%. So yeah, the power draw is really nice on these things. I don't have the specific stats, but I can throw it right here. The power draw on both of these devices. So that's a receiver and a recorder together. And we're getting that kind of power for an 8 to 12 hour shoot day. So if you get the appropriate powering device, you can go for as long as you possibly need on a realistic shoot day with these devices. And now I'm gonna talk about some mixed stuff. So this can kind of go either way depending on how it works for you. So the first one, and it's a big one for me now anyway, is the form factor. So the form factor of the X8 it's really nice for, handheld field use. But as our practice has evolved, I found that it's not really the setup for me anymore. Because as I showed you, we're operating from a bag here. Now this isn't like a legit like sound bag, but like for the ease of operations of how we're doing things now, we have it operating out of a bag. So the form factor is not really great for being in here because of like the fact that you have to, if you want to lay it flat, it's kind of awkward to operate. And then it's not gonna go in a sound bag, a real sound bag, obviously, because of the way it's designed. So it's just a bit awkward. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to recreate this for the video, but there's like an odd occurrence that happens where sometimes when you power cycle it, it'll turn on and you'll get a please wait notification that no matter how long you wait for it, it never goes away, and the only thing you can do is to power cycle it again and restart, which, I mean, it's like a minor inconvenience, but it's a thing that happens that I've never seen like anybody else really talk about. So that's something that happens, and it's just one of those things where like if you're in a fast-paced situation, it might be like, oh my god, it's going, please wait, somebody, what's happening? So it's a little frustrating and a little worrisome at times, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's never caused any issue that's earth-shattering or like shoot ruining. Ultimately, I found it's just an inconvenience. So not great, not bad, just inconvenient. As I previously talked about, where there's these nice, well laid out mixing and monitoring pages, I gotta say, I don't like on the fly mixing with the touchscreen because it doesn't have a tactile response. It's not like being on an F6 or an F8N or sound devices where you actually have the dials to turn and you can actually like turn the dial and you know that you have a finite movement to change the gain while you're mixing. Whereas we're moving your finger on the screen, it's not linear, There's not literally like a linear response when you're moving your finger on the screen to try and mix on the go, which could lead to, hiccups while you're mixing. And that's not ideal, but I mean, if you get used to it, I'm sure you can figure it out. But as opposed to using any other type of actual mixing setup, this is not the ideal setup. Now, in our initial video about this, we talked about the idea of using timecode with this, and at the time, we had high hopes, and those hopes were dashed in a sense because this device has timecode, although it's only if you have the Bluetooth adapter attached, which, quick aside on the Bluetooth adapter, it exists, never used it, no use for me. Although I'm sure if I did get it, it would be handy because I'm pretty sure you can like use it to remote rename files on here, so that way when you deliver them, they're already what they need to be, and that's cool. I didn't try it. It's a thing that happens. It's a thing that exists. If it fits your use case, go ahead. But back to that. You can only use timecode if you have the Bluetooth adapter attached. And then another gotcha is that said timecode is only going to be through the Atomos Ultrasync Blue system. So you're basically locked into using one timecode system. And for me, that's not going to fly because I used the DDTC1 timecode setup. So, I mean, that's not going to fly for me, which is really unfortunate. So as I detailed in our timecode video, check that out here, I have the most bootleg setup where we have the timecode into the 3.5mm port, and we burn an audio track for timecode. So ultimately for us, in real practice, this is only a 5-track audio recorder because of that. And if you're going to be using a timecode workflow, this might not be the answer for you. I don't really care for the mix track because I have never used it. Anyone I've ever sent audio to never use it because they're going to use the individual tracks that aren't mixed together. I'm sure it's probably for like, you know, a rushes type thing where you gotta just send the audio, slap it together for dailies type thing. Sure, but I wish there was an option to turn that off. And if I'm wrong, please tell me in the comment section below so I can turn that off. But the fact that I always have to like manually separate out in post the mix track so I don't have to have it within my media bins, I don't enjoy that. Like, and there's the same way that, and this is a really good feature that I should have mentioned the good, but it's like you can turn off any track that you need. So there's 6 tracks, and for the most part, we are running tracks 5 and 6, and we're running tracks 5, 6, 1, and then that might be it. So that way I can just turn off 3, 4, and 2. So that way, when I get the files back, it's only 1, 5, and 6. At first, I made the mistake of not looking into that, so I would just get like 4 to 5 tracks of dead audio, which is really frustrating, and I thought that was a bug. But no, I was just using it wrong. So if you find yourself in that same position, just turn off those tracks. And another thing is the actual very nice monitoring, which I didn't mention before. Let's talk about that now. The monitoring is really nice. You can turn on and off any track individually to listen to, which is really handy because since we have to feed in timecode into one of the tracks, you do not want to hear the sound of audio timecode. It is awful. Yeah. Imagine hearing that in your ears for 8 hours. Sucks. Okay, so now let's talk about the bad. And honestly, I only have 2 things. One, again, timecode. The fact that the timecode option is lacking is really not great for me. And that's for me, that's my use case of how we used it. As you know, we shoot multi-camera for certain projects, so I gotta have timecode on this camera, I have timecode on that camera, and then here, and then I have to process first the timecode into the tracks in post, and it's a whole thing before I give it to somebody. It's a really annoying kind of setup. And then, granted, timecode at this price range, you're probably not getting it to any meaningful capacity, or it's gonna be some stuff like this where it's proprietary through one system, sure. But I don't enjoy that. And granted, that's kind of what I signed up for by getting this, and it was something I learned and grew into in past. So that's something to consider. Again, if timecode is for you, unless you're using Atomos Ultrasync Blue, you probably need to look elsewhere. And then this is just a kind of using it over time thing, which that the paint durability on the front buttons is not great. After 2 years of use, the stop button has almost entirely worn away, so that's not great. And I feel like that should be something durable, because honestly, the rest of the body, the rest of the actual physical design of this thing has been rock solid. It's kind of crazy. On the first shoot we took it on, my sound op dropped it. And I was like, and it was fine. It was fine. Not even a passing dent in the paint of the back. So that's how I knew, okay, for small drops, it'll live. But big drops, like almost any electronic, don't do it. That was a big deal, and yeah, I'm glad it survived, but the paint durability on these buttons is leaves something to be desired. Okay, so in comparison to a lot of the recorders at this price range, this comes in at $369. And after kind of surveying what the other recorders in this price range looks like, honestly, I gotta say, as much as I've had my beef with it, at this price range, you kind of can't beat it because of the features that it offers. Although, I gotta say, as a filmmaker, as someone who actually like goes out and I have to use this to create audio for people that need it for their projects, right? For people that aren't just myself, this feels like a half measure. Because of the lack of timecode support, because of the form factor, I feel like if you're serious about doing film work, you're serious about being a sound op or like a one-man videography man, or, you know, like a small videography team, this is probably not the recorder for you, depending on your use case. For me, like I said, I use timecode. That's honestly the biggest thing for me. The fact that it does not have timecode support and the form factor. The form factor and the lack of timecode support is my biggest hang-up, which is why I'm probably moving to the Zoom F6 or F8, depending on how things kind of pan out for my audio workflow, because I want to be able to have those dials to work on. I want to have inbuilt timecode, and I'm gonna get 2 more XLR ports, which, by the way, like I kind of mentioned, it has 4 XLR ports, and that's great, but I can quickly see how that won't become enough, because right now we're running the D80 Theos system, so we have 2 lavs. I'm going to be getting another D80 Theos soon, which is going to be another 2 lavs. I'm going to be using one of those for wireless boom. So that's kind of where I'm at, right? And then I want to have those 2 spares just in case something else comes up. All I can really say is you really need to evaluate what you need. And that's with any tool, any filmmaking tool. You need to evaluate what works for you. What works for me and what I need might not be the same what works for you and what you need. So really sit down, evaluate every single thing that you need for this, right? And honestly, I feel like Tascam needs to get more competitive in this space, right? Now, they did just have the release of the FRAV2, and that's exciting because there's some really cool features that I hope goes into their next recorder, right? Tascam does not have a competitor to something like the Zoom F6 or the Zoom F8 or the Sound Devices entry-level devices, right? They need something like that, especially to win back the kind of pro audio space. And granted, I'm not really sure if Tascam's in the pro audio space, like Zoom, like Sound Devices. We're on the way crazy end, like Zaxcom and WizzyCom and stuff like that. But they need to get in there and get some foothold, right? After 2 years of using this recorder, I gotta say, it has served me well, but I'm probably moving on to something else. But do not let that dissuade you from possibly choosing it, as it is a fantastic device. You can use it to make fantastic audio. It all falls on you, the operator, right? That's with most things. It falls on you. The device does not make the op. The op makes the device. Something like that. Anyway, that's gonna do it for us today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you learned something, if you feel like you learned something, make sure you tell me. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, and of course comment. Tell me about how you feel. Tell me about what you think about what your use case of this recorder has been. I wanna know, because I wanna know what it's been like for other people to use this, and if they've run into the same problems that I have. Yeah, so we'll see you guys in the next one. Yeah, there's some fun stuff coming. There always has been. I'm sorry for the delay. We're back. It was Jover, but now we're back. So yeah, guys, we'll see you in the next one.